shocked at how little research there was on Levy as an artist, a visual artist. Because in addition to being a very well-known poet, obviously, you're sitting in a room of all this visual art that was created by Levy. And printmaking plays a key role, and if you want to distribute a lot of things, make a lot of copies, then you're gonna have to do printmaking. Is everyone familiar with Levy, or just met him tonight? Okay, that's fine. His real name is d.a.levy, and he changed to the sobriquet d.a.levy, always all lowercase, just like that. And he was a central figure in Cleveland's counterculture in the 1960s. Probably, I mean, he's not a household name, but I'd like to get at least a few more people knowing how important his role was in his very short life. Not only did he write and publish his own poems, many of which are about Cleveland, he created countless publications to promote the work of his friends and contemporaries. He organized community readings in coffee houses and churches. You can see him, there's actual video of him on the Cleveland Memory Project giving a performance right here, and that was at the Well, which is in Trinity Cathedral's basement, where they actually was one of their meeting places. Between 1963 and 1968, Levy published at least 167 handmade underground publications, which is a lot for a one-man show. Most poets and writers were content to let others do the printing, but Levy was maniacal about doing all of the work himself, from beginning to end. He worked endless hours printing, collating, stenciling, stapling, binding, organizing, sometimes going without food or sleep until he finished, because he was just that kind of an artist. And I think we can all relate, or may have known an artist like that in our lifetime. He started with, and you can almost see it in this really, really bad grainy photo. There is a small tabletop. This is the only photo in existence of his tabletop Kelsey letterpress. And I found it after I put this show up, but I found it and I'm very proud. So you can see this is in the basement of the apartment building behind the West Side Market, which they're actually doing up. I just drove past the other day. Of course, they're gonna make that some fancy place now. Anyway, it wasn't when he lived there, and he worked for hours and hours and hours in that basement, making his first publications by hand setting type on a tiny little letterpress. Anyone that has done letterpress knows that hand setting type takes a really, really, really long time. And if you're working small too, it's even more difficult. And you know, he's working with a chase that's probably about this big too, so he's limited in size. So as soon as he was able, he acquired a mimeograph machine. And this is a woman operating the exact same model that he had in the mid to late 60s. The mimeograph was the tool of choice for the spread of radical ideas in the 60s. Mimeos were inexpensive, easy to access, and really flexible. They enabled underground writers and agitators to dissemble their work more quickly than ever before. Again, right before this, your only option is letterpress. So this is a huge jump, being able to use something that's already typed on a typewriter. You can put it in this machine and have instant copies right in front of you. Mimeo, it's also called a stencil duplicator or a stencil machine, but it was invented in the 19th century. But as you can see, the one here is much more streamlined, and it works by forcing ink through a prepared stencil onto the paper as it passes through the machine. I'm not going to get like too technical here, but if you want to, you really can with this stuff. I am not an expert, but to make a stencil, you just use a regular typewriter that has a stencil setting on it. And what that does is, or you use a typewriter that doesn't have a ribbon, because you don't need the ink from the typewriter. What you need is the relief of the letter hitting the stencil. And so typewriters, I didn't even know this, older typewriters have a Mimeo setting, so you can change it. And then this mode, the mechanism, will then, the type element strikes the stencil directly. And then the impact of this displaces the coating on the stencil, and then it kind of cuts what it does is it cuts a hole, and then the ink can pass through the hole. It's crazy. I'm not going to get into it very deeply, but when a blank sheet of paper goes through the machine, this rotating drum you can see here, the paper passes through the machine, the ink is inside that drum, it's forced out through the little stencil, and you can use the stencil probably for about 100, 200 copies before it would start to break down. So this is groundbreaking technology in the 60s. This machine was invented by Edison in the 1880s, but you wouldn't see one in a grade school, you know, until the 50s and 60s. Levy acquired a Mimeo from his friends, meaning he asked his friends for money and he used it to buy a mimeograph machine secondhand. And he immediately began using it almost exclusively. It's, like I said, much faster than hand-setting type. The Mimeo's speed allowed Levy to work almost as fast as he could type, because you still have to type, right? So that still takes some time. And right over there on the wall behind you, we have this lovely display of, on the far right, we're looking at this on the screen so you can get an idea of how big it actually is. I always hate how the scale is always ridiculously off. But I made replicas of both of those so you can actually have the experience of holding it and paging through it. The one on the far right is Visualized Prayers and Hymn for the American Gods, and that was made, one of his first things that he made on a mimeograph machine in 1966. The great thing about this is that you can see the errors, right? Because the errors on the stencil are going to be on every single copy that you make, just like you're doing screen printing or any other printmaking method. So you can actually see on here, but you can see it better over there, that what happens sometimes is it doesn't punch out the hole on the inside of the letter, and so that's a common thing when you can tell things are mimeographed, because the inside of letters will look like a little distorted or messed up. So you can, like the A, B, D, E, G, they often would fall away, and then it caused the ink to fill in the letter, and it causes distortions. But still, that's very minimal compared to letterpress, the problems that you would encounter doing this same thing on letterpress. But this also allowed him to start to experiment with typewriters. And he made what are called concrete poems, and a concrete poem, I don't think he coined that term, I think Kenneth Patchen did, but it's where you use the typewriter. We've all done this, right? Remember when we, no? Oh, I'm so old. Jackie, okay. I remember in computer class in 8th grade, I did this and I made a cat, a really bad cat. But again, he's able to use that. What he's not able to do on a Mimeo is use images, right? Because you can't, there's no way to reproduce an image on a mimeograph machine. You can't draw onto that stencil, you know, it has to be typed onto. So you're limited, so then what does he do? He starts making images out of the typewriter. And so you can look over there at the whole thing. Some of them are really great, really, really very funny. There was also a parallel technology known as spirit duplicating, usually referred to as Ditto, which is a proprietary eponym for the Ditto company. They're just outside of Chicago. Over there is DD, the Ditto machine, which is a model D20 hand-operated Ditto machine. Couldn't find out the exact date, even with the serial number, but it's mid-60s. So it's right in the wheelhouse of when that was made. I know this is weird. Right behind you, you can see all of this stuff. But so the duplicator uses 2-ply masters that can be typed onto, just like the old one, but they can also be drawn on. So you can draw directly onto these and actually make something. The duplicator uses 2-ply masters. Everything is all dittoed out. I actually have a box of them here so you can see their awesome graphic design. This is what a stencil looks like before it's been used. It's very similar to like carbon paper technology. You can see you can draw directly onto here, and then the carbon paper transfers it onto the back, and then the back is the master that passes through the machine. But you don't use ink with the Ditto machine. You use spirit, which is why it's called the spirit duplicator. Not spirit as in, ooh, spirit as in, oh my God. So that's why I don't have it set up today, because the fluid that's in it was proprietary, but what it is a combination of wood grain alcohol, denatured alcohol, and some other horrible chemicals that you can't even get. And if you are my age or older, which a couple of you are, you might remember this action smelled so delicious. And I wish we could replicate it, but we can't. Here's some examples. You could buy pre-made masters from educational companies, and we use these. Look at this cursive. I mean, come on. But these had a very distinctive, almost fruity smell, and now that I know what it is, wow, I can't believe we were all smelling it. Unfortunately, these are so old, they don't smell anymore. So we did run it through, and we were very disappointed with the smell results. But we're very lucky to have this ditto machine because, you're here, so you saw that. Because what you can do with these, you have so much more flexibility with graphics. This purple ink is what Ditto is famous for. It was called aniline purple, and it was their most common color, but there were other colors too. And you can see, and this saxophone, the plastic saxophone found in an Egyptian tomb that Levy made in 1966, he uses a couple of different colored stencils. And you can see the kind of aqua green. It's hard to tell because these faded so quickly. Ditto is not archival, much like a risograph is today. They fade almost immediately. So you can draw directly onto it and do whatever you want, but if you want it to last more than 5 years, it's not going to. So that's why these are brand new. We just made these on that machine, but they start to fade. You can look in the replica and you can see in the replica where you lose some of the stuff. But he's drawing directly onto it. You can see how faded and illegible the pages has come. Another benefit of the Mimeo is that doesn't happen. So anything that's made with a mimeograph machine is using ink. And so if you're using ink, it's ink, so it's gonna stay there and last a lot longer. So that's kind of a crash course through the two printing technologies that he used the most in the mid-60s, well, the three with the letterpress. And it was around, a couple years before this that he made what I would call his only fine art project, and it's the Cleveland print portfolios. And we have both of them on view right here, and because Cleveland State had 2 copies of each of them, you're able to see the verso of each of them, which is really exciting because there's stuff on the, you want to hang these things, but you want to be able to see what's on the back. So we're really lucky that you're able to see the back. Most of Levy's work was exclusively poetry or prose. In other words, he's making poetry journals and things with poems in them. But in 1964, he undertook this project. According to his friend, roommate, and fellow poet Russell Salomon, Levy worked on these prints in the basement of Adelaide and Martin Simon's Shaker Heights home in 1964. Adelaide Simon was kind of like the Gertrude Stein of the 60s in Cleveland. She had salons in her home. She was very, wealthy white woman who liked to bring in a lot of poets and people and give them support when she agreed with them. So I don't know how he convinced her to let him set up in her basement with his letterpress, but he did, and he said, I want to make these 2 fine art print portfolios. So he started making them, and I'm sure she was just thrilled when she saw what he was making because, as you can see, he gathered used condoms from notable locations around town. So this is the cover, and you can see the letterpress elements on it. Here is Edgewater Park. So you got a couple of these. There's one called the Black Poppies of Lake Erie. They're a couple that he fished out of the lake. And then to make the prints, it's not exactly clear, but I think what he did was he used that little letterpress and did it like pressure prints. So he's actually making little matrices with the used condoms, inking over them, and then using the machine like a pressure tool. And he made, I think he made 30 copies of the first run of the 5. So there are not very many of these out there in the world. We're really lucky to have it. So he calls these portraits of each location using garbage. But if you'd been to Edgewater Park in 1964, I think you would have been shocked at how different it is from today, according to my dad. It was pretty bad. And then on the back of each print, he delicately letterpressed the title. Oh, I guess he made 50. He used, like I said, mismatched type. So he has a lot of type that doesn't match. You'll notice on these over here especially, he didn't even have complete sets of type. So he's just using what he has to make his art. These prints were loose and they were presented unbound in the folded folio you can see at the front of these. So it was not a bound thing. It was meant to be like a print portfolio, which is a very highfalutin, fancy thing. It's hard to describe. Print folios in this format are traditionally used by fine art printmakers for collectors. So collectors buy portfolios of things. You know, it's not something you see every day. And so he's mocking that by making this, what's in his print portfolio is portraits of locations using garbage and used condoms. But in the same year, he took it even further. He's like, I'm not done, I wanna make volume 2. And this time we're gonna have 6 prints. This one's a little bit different. There's no condom action in these. But for both of these portfolio, you can see he's using heavyweight laid artist paper, which he never uses for anything ever, and I'm pretty sure the Simons bought it for him, which is probably why they wanted him to make it in their house, because then they even have more control over what's happening. But eventually they kicked him out. Obviously that wasn't gonna last for very long because he would work insane hours and be up all night very late. So using this high quality paper also suggests that he thought of these as like a fine art enterprise, not just something that you just pass out on the street. They're fancy. His roommate said that these prints are very well composed and stand as art, not simply as annoyance, which they also did that a lot intentionally. So similar to the 5 Cleveland prints folio, each print in this one references a familiar Cleveland location, including the famous R&B and Motown music venue Leo's Casino. But for this set, Levy didn't use condoms. He emphasized texture, using staples, little bits of stencil. That's what you can see being repeated, like tight, mismatched stencils and things. Other 3-dimensional objects. I can't imagine what he put into this machine. It really probably saw a lot of weirdness and large plastic junk being forced in there. But he did also make some actual prints, because these are woodcuts. So I know you can't see it because it's behind the screen, but when it's over, I'll take the screen down. He actually experimented with some woodcuts, really deeply gouged woodcuts, really horrible impressions. But that's what he did, so there they are. So I'm not sure how he gouged them either, or what he was using as gouges. I can't imagine that he had a set of fancy wood carving tools. There's no way. So he might have just been using what he had at hand, and it was probably just some random piece of wood, but anyway, there's a couple of woodcuts in this portfolio. This had 6 because the Rogue 6 print is this one, which is Lakefront at Night, which is, I don't know, it's like almost so on the nose as embarrassingly funny, you know, like Lakefront at Night. And all it is just a roll of ink and some staples, and it's really hard to read on the back too. So those are the 2 Cleveland print folios. Like I said, there's very few of these extant at all, but for Cleveland State to have two complete of each one in their collection is really, really great. So this is exciting stuff. Moving on, Levy was the most visible figure in the city's emergent youth subculture, and his advocacy of marijuana and LSD began to attract a lot of attention of the law enforcement. In the fall of '66, 6 plainclothes narcotics cops came to one of his readings. Levy was subsequently arrested and charged with obscenity and contributing to the delinquency of minors, because there were a couple of 16-year-olds in the crowd at the reading. This was actually at the Asphodel bookstore in the old arcade, which was actually not in the nice part of the arcade. Someone told me it was like down a weird hallway, and I said, yeah, that tracks. But everyone that was there was arrested, and the owner of the bookstore and Levy were actually charged. He ended up paying a fine, but the experience took its toll. They confiscated everything out of his apartment. So they took his letterpress machine. They took all of his type. They took the ditto machine. They took everything and confiscated everything. So what the police are doing by doing that is a very old trick. It's called take the means of production away, and then the bad stuff will be quiet. And so he never got it back. He tried, but never got it back. So after the police confiscated, I also have, this is a really, so you can see some of the articles that were in the Plain Dealer or Cleveland Press and Plain Dealer at the time. Immediately people started coming to his defense. Like even in Cleveland, people were like, this is ridiculous. So this is a new discovery. There was a protest on Public Square protesting his arrest. And some of these posters are really great. The biggest obscenity in Cleveland is City Hall's attitude toward the Huff area. Of course, this is right around the Huff riots. Levy was arrested for writing the way everybody talks. You're next. I swore at East 9th and Euclid on March 31st at 11 a.m. Where were the police? And there's one on the right that says something about a Bible. So, but look at this is like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. But this is the only photo of this protest that happened in Public Square. Okay, so after the police took all the stuff away, what's he gonna do now? He's gotta make stuff, so it's time to move to the commercial printing shop and see what you can do. It's hard to describe how lucky he was that someone let him make this magazine that you see on the wall right here. The police took the other ways to print is to use the format of a newspaper. And he had it professionally offset printed at the Call and Post, which was a historically very renowned black newspaper in Cleveland. So of course they're like open to new ideas and allowed these things to be printed there. The Buddhist third-class junk mail Oracle was one of Cleveland's first underground newspapers, and one of the first like free kind of little magazine, like the Free Times, like Scene, like one of those. This was the first, at least in Cleveland. There was stuff in New York and in San Francisco, but Cleveland had one before a lot of places. The Oracle was available at coffee houses and bookstores, much like the free weeklies that were to follow. Levy himself could often be seen handing out copies at readings, coffee houses, and at the be-ins at the Wado Lagoon. He would ask if you could buy it, but if you didn't have the money, he'd just give it to you anyway. Or if you did give him money, then he would give the money to the next guy who's asking for money. It was very, be-in, summer of love type stuff going on. He was also known to make sure that copies made their way onto the windshields of police cars all around the east side, and purportedly had them actually sent to the desks of the county prosecutor and the people that were responsible for his arrest. So I just love the idea of them coming in, like going through their mail. And a lot of them actually reference these people in very, very obvious detail too, which is great. So the Call and Post, to make these kind of things, you make flats. And anyone that has ever worked for their high school yearbook, who's my age, might remember how you lay out these flats. And it is like collage. You can do it like collage. And that's the way that Levy did it, because he loved collage. He was a collage maniac. And to lay these things out, he's using clippings from his massive collection of just bits and bobs that he got from other newspapers, from other magazines, from artists, things that he would type up, and you can see how it all fits together. But it's right there. You can see it right there. It looks much better over there. But it says 10 cents in Cleveland, 15 cents elsewhere. Have no fear, for the angry gods and the peaceable gods are the creations of your own mind. Number 13. You get the gist of this. It's all very like that. But a lot of it was pretty incendiary and considered risque and definitely considered obscenity. So there's a lot of nudity in these. I tried to keep as many boobs out as I could, but there's a lot. And that's all part of the like shock value that he wanted to get across. So Levy was an extremely prolific collagist. I don't know if that's a word, collage maker. Using scraps and cuts from newspapers, magazines, and books, Levy created fantastical compositions which he then glued down onto a piece of cardstock. And this one right here is an extremely rare survivor. As you can see, it was printed onto the cover of one of the issues of the Buddhist Third Class Junk Mail Oracle. And it is right there on the wall. The original collages were afterthoughts, you know, like once it's been printed, there's not so much value in it. But after we're done, you can take a look at how bad the quality is of the offset printing of that. And that's the other thing. Once you start handing your work over to someone else to print, you lose all quality control, and I'm sure that drove him mad because he really was a control freak. And so, you know, there's only so much you can do. I don't think they were giving him proofs to study before they do the run. I think it was like, here, you take this and you like it. So he lost a little bit of control. Not only did he make collages for artistic aims, he also used them as advertisements in his newspaper. Here you can see two collages that advertised the Continental Art Theater, which was 13931 Euclid, which is now sadly demolished. It was actually the sister to the Cedar Lee. So it was built the same year as the Cedar Lee, and it was just down from the Sculpture Center, like in that little strip right there, almost to East Cleveland. But it's gone. It was an art house theater. Adele's Bar was right there too, which was another popular hangout for Cleveland's burgeoning counterculture. A few nights a week, Levy could be found passing out copies of the Buddhist Third Class Junk Mail Oracle in the lobby as the crowds left the viewings, but he never had money to go to the shows, so he just stood and then handed them out to the people as they left. These are right here, and again, these are survivors. I don't know why they did, but there's a handful of them that still exist. The original collages that he cut and pasted himself. So moving on to the story, after Levy's arrest, he received international support from other poets and small press publisher. Allen Ginsberg, as you can see his lovely head here, came to Cleveland to read at a benefit for Levy's defense fund in 1967. So in this picture, you can see Jim Lowell. He's the one that opened the bookstore, who also got arrested, d.a.Levy and Allen Ginsberg. And this is a poster that was made here in Cleveland that I just discovered, and I'm pretty sure was made by the same gentleman who made that poster back there. This is just an amazing poster, and he signed it. This was a fine benefit for poetry. It says in 1991 he signed that. This performance was insane. It was at the Masonic. The sold out event included a performance by the band The Fugues from New York, who drove him here. There were readings, dancing, and a huge police presence. In fact, the police were actually doing that thing like they did at the Doors, like where they like make a chain of awful, but they're looking at the crowd, not at the stage. So there's some apocryphal stories of Allen Ginsberg like doing some weird stuff behind them, like including like, you know, taking it out. So that happened. Also, there was a girl there who had a hunting falcon, like a hawk, on her hand, and was releasing it and having it fly like right over the cop's head. So it was an all-out crazy night, and they made a ton of money, and they made enough money to cover their legal defense. So that was good because he really needed it. Locally, bumper stickers, buttons were made to help raise money with phrases like "hands off Levy," "Levy not Locher," who was the mayor at the time, Ralph Locher. I don't even know how to say his name. I'm sure he was awful. Protest poems, flyers, and pamphlets were quickly made and distributed. The most famous of these items was the Legalized Levy poster, screen printed by wonderful Cleveland artist Martin Zuder, who was here at the opening, and it was really, really cool to meet him. And I asked him if he remembered. He worked as a screen printer, that was his day job, and so late at night, I assume, is when he's making this stuff, right? This would not be okay to be making hundreds and hundreds of Legalized Levy prints, or the Ginsberg one. And then he sold them at his gallery, which was called Gallery 12, which you can see posters. This is an ad that was actually in the Call and Post that I found. It's behind me, I can't tell. That says posters available at Gallery 12. But if you've been to Max Backs, you've seen the poster. which is at the top of the stairs into the basement. And that's the first time I ever heard of Levy. Was I saw this poster when I moved here in 2006 and went, who's that? Why are we legalizing him? And then looked it up and went down the rabbit hole. We're really lucky that, like I said, Martin was here for the opening, but also one of his friends who has an original copy loaned that one for the show. So that's one of the original run of the legalized Levy posters that were sold at Gallery 12. All the other stuff, the buttons and bumper stickers, I wasn't able to find any evidence of those. I don't think that was a joke that only lasted like that year. I think after that, no one really knew what it meant. But unfortunately, his legal troubles really dragged on. Shocking, that they would drag this on, and the fees just kept going up and up and up, and he became rather depressed and unhappy. So he and his friends were also they were getting followed off the rapid. They were feeling like they were really coming down on them, that nowhere was safe anymore. They were concerned that they were like a drug ring, that they were selling weed at these readings, and if you'd seen their shoes and clothes, you would know that they don't have money for drugs, because these people are seriously poor. If they were drug dealers, they would not be riding the rapid also. It's just, it was harassment. It was like concentrated harassment. And no one knew when they were gonna be arrested next. So in that culture, he wasn't doing well. He kind of burned pretty much all of his stuff, including most of his paintings one night. This painting right here is a rare survivor too. There's a couple of paintings that are in private collections. This one is in the collection at CSU. But this night, he burned most of his paintings. And then in November 1968, his friends couldn't find him. They did a welfare check, and he was found dead in his one-bedroom apartment in East Cleveland from a supposedly self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head, to the forehead. There's some weirdness about it, about how this occurred and how the evidence was destroyed very quickly. So there are some conspiracy theorists. The trajectory of the bullet was downward, not up, or it was up, it was downward, yeah. So if you see what I'm saying? I don't want to get CSI, but that doesn't really make sense. But then he was very quickly, his family were religious Jews, so, he was immediately put to rest. And he is buried in a cemetery in Mayfield next to his father. It's a sad ending, but some of his friends continued the Buddhist third-class junk mail oracle after his death. And here's the first issue published after his death. And it says, wanted for the assassination of d.a.Levy, and it's Levy. So this is the kind of humor, I guess, that was getting them through the inexplicable loss of one of the most important figures in Cleveland at only 26 years old. Who knows what he would have made or would have done, but he was adamant he wouldn't leave Cleveland, and everyone else left. So same old story. It's the same story today. All these people that start out here and leave. He was convinced that Cleveland could have a culture that would support artists and support the arts, and it could happen, but he just met with so much pain and resistance, he couldn't do it. But the happy note is how many publications stemmed from what he started. This is the last issue of the Buddhist third-class junk mail oracle in December 1969. A nicer tribute, I think, than the last one. But the people that made this with him went on to make the Swamp Erie Da Boom Boom, which was a very famous free magazine in the 70s, and then some of those people even started the Free Times. So there is a direct line from Levy and his Buddhist third-class junk mail oracle to, I guess, Scene magazine today. That's all we got left. I can't believe we still have one. We're lucky to even have one. But with the popularity of zines, especially in the print world today, I think there's a resurgence of interest in these old methods of printmaking. like Ditto, like Mimeo, like risograph, which is like the kind of granddaughter of the mimeograph machines. Levy was, in a way, the grandfather of small press publishing in Cleveland. And like I said, he was only 26 years old when he died, but he made a very significant and lasting impact on the underground print culture in Cleveland, and it's an influence that continues to this day. Thank you. So we're gonna take a tiny break, and then we're gonna reconvene in this room, and I will introduce you to R.A. Washington, who will talk about this room in about, yes.
So was there a connection with Cleveland State University? How did they end up having all the materials?
Cleveland State University's Poetry Center was started in the 60s. And so they have and to this day, the Cleveland State Poetry Society uses Zygote actually for their readings. It's a venerable institution, and it's a great place for poets. And that place at Trinity Cathedral where they did, those were Cleveland State readings. And then there were some at Fenn Tower too. So I think it was because of the culture of, that they actually supported poets. So I think that's how it ended up there.
It was really smart of them to hold on to this stuff.
Also, I should mention that the Cleveland Memory Project is available online, and if you have not played around on the Cleveland Memory Project, please do. All of the Levy materials, including every page of these magazines, is available to download, high quality download. So you can go look up one of those and get all 14 pages right on your computer, right in front of you. What an amazing world that we live in, that we're able to do that. And all the other Levy materials that aren't in the show, you can see. There's also some at the Cleveland Public Library at the main branch, but not very much. And there's also a large archive at Kent State. And I think that's where the family ended up giving his stuff. But he had absolutely no connection to Kent State, so I don't know why that happened. It might have been because it was around 1970, 71, so I don't know. Not sure. Does anyone have any other questions? We can have a Q&A at the end, and yeah. Okay, so we're gonna take a little break, and we're gonna pull all this down, and then we're gonna go in that room, and R.A. is gonna talk about that room. Okay. artist, Proof Fellow R.A. Washington, who is well known in this city for being a purveyor of all kinds of culture. So we're thrilled. I was thrilled when I asked R.A. to activate this room in some way, and he said, hold on, let me go to my truck, and then came in with a giant box of zines. And that was just one of many boxes, which he's going to tell you about. So let's give it up for R.A.
I really enjoyed your talk, and I thought that you covered a lot of ground. D.a.Levy was like such a myth for a lot of us when we first started, because you would hear about the activity. But I recently learned that Russell Atkins, who was also an underground poetry legend of Cleveland, was the person that gave d.a.Levy his first letterpress. And coincidentally, because Zygote's involved with this whole Caramoo print shop stuff that you might have heard of, well, Caramoo had its own Zygote, essentially, in its stores. That's where Russell Atkins took d.a.Levy to teach him how to use a letterpress. So this story was told to me by somebody that was at the opening. They're like, well, where's Russell Atkins? I'm like, hey man, calm down, we didn't know. But so essentially what we wanted to do with this room was to kind of just highlight why, if you were creative and looking for a way to connect, why you would even want to make your own publication and print something, and like the joy of like actually making a publication or making something that you could pass out, and the history of that connected to d.a.Levy, but beyond that, Cleveland's always had strong underground presses. And so represented here, well, there's a few stories I want to tell you, but represented here is zines collected by Cleveland Public Library's zine archive of the early 2000s that was started by the librarian Kristen Schmidt, and then Cleveland Public Library decided that they couldn't house said archive anymore, and it was going to be thrown away. So we stepped in at Guide to Culture and took in the archive and housed it for 6 years in our store. And then when the store, we transitioned to a nonprofit and ended up closing, I kept the archive in a white Sprinter van since 2019. So it's just in there, the entire archive. Some of it is stored at Outlandish Press. So this is like a representation of a lot of that collection, and it spans from 1976 to maybe 2006. And there's poetry zines. There's quite a few things that are like small press publications, like people that decide to organize themselves as a press. When you get up here on it, you can kind of see there's Night Ballet Press, Crisis Chronicles. There's a Mike Decapity zine. Mike Decapity, who wrote Through the Windshield, he had a couple of zines. There's a D.R. Wagner, who was good friends with d.a.Levy. few things from the Catholic workers, a few things from the anarchists. There's quite a few queer and feminist zines. And then there's the infozine culture where they're gonna teach you how to do a thing. Those zines are all represented here, and I pretty much was like, no real rhyme or reason, just wanted to make sure that we had enough representation of all the different kinds. So you can see like there's some copy machine, just black and white. We don't know, we made a matrix and we're just gonna copy it and staple it, boom. And then there's some people that obviously could do some graphics and things like that. And we stapled them up there, which was, in retrospect, we probably shouldn't have stapled them to the wall like that, but we thought it would look pretty cool. Now we had to get all the staples out. Also, there were organizations that would do like a history zine, like, oh, you wanna know about Malcolm X? Here's 2 speeches by Malcolm X. Zine, and a lot of these publications would be free, or pay what you want, and so people can print more things. I personally think that everyone should make at least one publication in their life, because you'll find out pretty quickly that you don't want to do that again, or that you really want to do it all the time. Here's some of my favorite ones up here are some of the joke zines. There's quite a few joke zines, like the Tales of the Traveling Penny Salesman. The Bomb Threat zine, right there. That was what to do if you wanted to scare someone with a bomb threat, like how to threaten with a bomb. Yeah, I don't really know exactly why I am part of this talk, but oh, I know why, because of these.
Yeah.
So the other thing that happened was that the good doctor was like, and because d.a.levy is such a dude, and that whole print culture is all dudey, we need to do something to subvert it, and there's no black people involved, we need to do something to subvert it. And I was like, what can we do? Well, you figure it out. And then promptly walked away. She walks very fast. So I started thinking about like what would be the most d.a.levy nod to do. And then I remember that there was a form of poetry called the cento. And a cento is where you could take another poem or a group of poems, and you pull out words and kind of collage a new poem with it. So then, well, okay, that checks the one box of how to like get a new work out of this whole endeavor. And then I asked Michelle Smith, who's a black woman, and Kisha, Nicole Foster, who's a black woman, to make these centos based on d.a.levy poems. And I had to say that their poems are better than d.a.levy's poems. I mean, I know it's subjective, but you can take them. We made them on the risograph. We typed them up and made them on the risograph. Michelle's poem is made up of parts of maybe 6 different poems, and then Kisha's is made up of, I think she said like 12 poems. So I tried to decide if we Smith, and then ask Kisha. Yeah, so like, I'm not gonna do that, but I will read them out loud. If you want freedom, write it. A Cinto by Kisha Nicole Foster. If you want a revolution, don't mistake changing policemen bleeding in the streets, kisses, that rolling of long grass lawn tranquility, of the minds of night work, a goldfish in a toilet bowl, a piece of the captured sun, the heart of a melon's wisdom on the city's strange figures. A dark winter night, whore, after 8 years writing my name is myself. The pen like sperm, old women sitting on tomorrow or yesterday's today. I have a city to cover with lines, with textured words. Cleveland called me a half-breed, a fanatic Jew in the Heights. For how many years with survival, she left in a whisper, her golden face, a last hungry kiss. Wind chimes in the street at night are weeping. Yeah. She sent that to me at 3 in the morning and then texted me a lot to make sure that I read it right then. Which is, you know, that's poets. This is Michelle's. There Are Worse Places, a Cinto by Michelle R. Smith. Walk around Cleveland, walk around the rotting shore. Beaches of broken glass and acid eerie sand. Ride the transit to the electric palaces of magic, dollars, money, dollars. Ride through the weeping ghost land of the Cherokee, Delaware, Huron, Cleveland. The city of skeleton dreams, the city of concrete prisons and dangerous people, Cleveland. The cells room of crack ashes and methadone crystals. Poets be reborn here. Police be Celtic blue. Sky be drama. Water be acid. Love be hunger. Cleveland is a happening in blood, guts, bones, flesh, living toward death, pushed over the edge, falling under strange wheels of time. Walk around. Be prepared to lose your peace. Be prepared to lose your politics. Justify your fear. Purify your eyes. Cleveland is a happening in American apathy and prophecy. A maniac garden of bought gods and broken angels, but there are worse places. I like that Michelle also kind of hinted to what the concrete poem, like a couple of nods by having like the dollar signs involved and the underlines. Yeah, really cool poem. And so you could take those. Both poems are printed on the risograph. One aspect of the show that we wanted to make sure to highlight was this concept of the bagel-zine. And if you look on the wall here, there's a poet. There was a poet named Jim Lang, and his day job was to give art tours of the Cleveland Clinic art collection, because Cleveland Clinic has an extensive, I don't know if you visited, they have an extensive collection of art in their hospitals. And since it's like a small city, it's Emerald City literally, you could walk through and Jim would give you a tour and tell you about the artists who were displayed. I think it's pretty awesome that they do that because a lot of times they do buy artists residing in Northeast Ohio. So a lot of people that you might even know, maybe some of you that are in the room right now are in this collection, and Jim would have given a tour and showed your work at Cleveland Clinic. The other thing that he did was that he made these bagel zines, and he was inspired by Steve Smith's. Steve Smith had this publication called Art Crimes, and so Jim was kind of like making fun of Steve and how serious he was about art crimes, and like all the people that Bob Luigi Drake, who had a Bottle Dog Press, and all these people had these presses and made the bagel zine. And basically, the issues would be either in these envelopes, like these inner office memo envelopes, like that you see at a college. And then inside would be poems that he had submitted from different poets around. Maybe a couple of pennies in each bag. Usually a couple of incense sticks, some feathers in this bag. And he would make editions of 100 to 150 of these bagel zines. And he would carry them around and pass them out for free. You could tip him if you wanted to. So around 2006 or 7, he came over to my house and he's like, baby poet, that's what he called me, baby poet. Baby poet, I'm gonna give you one copy of every bagel zine that I've done. And I said, no, don't. Please don't do this to me. And but he did, and so here's my favorite selection of some of the. I tried to pick ones that he used like a different carrying device, so you can see all the different holders of said bag. I didn't display the ones in the finest bags, because it's kind of hard to like get them out of the boxes that they're in without losing, because in those, the finest bag ones, there's 75 pennies in each one. 9 sticks of incense. But it goes from the now chalice-sized incense to the tiny cone incenses. So it's a step down, and you remember the little like really tiny like stick incenses that go in the little ceramic holder? Those, right? And they're kind of crushed up. One time he thought it would be funny, he put joints, like a joint in every 15th bag. It would have been too expensive to do all 150 bags. I recently smoked one of the joints from a bag from 2004, and I must tell you that was a bit mistake. Horrible mistake. So, and the other thing is with Jim, I never was able to get him to accept a poem of mine to go into a magazine, and it became like a running joke that he would deny me publication. And I would like to shout out Larry Smith, Bob Drake, and Jim Lang for never publishing me. You assholes. Look what has happened now. I'm a proof fellow at Zygote. See, you should have supported me then. So we stapled him to the wall too, because he deserves some holes in him. And so that's Jim Lang, and I knew he would really be tickled by us attempting to display Levy's visual art. Like the sheer audacity of this attempt, I must give you, we should really give some applause for it, because to pull the scholarship out of such little production, you know,
Yeah.
like not really what he was up to, but to pull it out, like I have a new respect for this aspect of d.a.levy's oeuvre, and we didn't lean on the poems. None of his poetry is here, and so I really think that that was like pretty audacious to have an exhibit like that. And thank you all for coming out. If you have any questions or anything that you want to say, right?
Will you write some poems for some people?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I could do that.
Great.
Yeah, is that what we? Oh, yeah.
Well, questions?
You check all those bags for joints?
Yeah, I definitely have. Yeah.
Oh, there's a candle in that one. I thought that might be one.
Yeah. There's nothing on that CD. It's one of his
His jokes.
his false bottom CDs. That's what he called them.
So who's like really doing this kind of zine presentation? Like
Now,
then, like this seems very like rare. Like
well, and I'm sure that they didn't know this at the time, but this reminds me of David Hammonds. David Hammonds is a legendary African-American multidisciplinary artist. I mean, quite legendary at this point. Had solo shows at the Met. But he would do, he had the body paints where he rubbed baby oil on himself and then threw himself down, body prints. And he threw himself naked down on the paper and make shapes. He also sold basically a snowball. He had snowballs wrote on a makeshift table of cardboard in the middle of New York, and he was like, snowballs for sale. And once he became quite famous, someone attempted to buy a replica of the snowball, and his gallerist was trying to get him to sell the snowball, but he kind of refused. And then he decided that he would sell it, and he showed up with a pitcher of water. He's like, the snowball melted, and the collector bought it. So these kind of pranks have existed in culture, and like Jim Lane was like, I mean, he was quite serious about poetry, but he also knew that all this was a shell game. You know, it was obvious, like, you know, he's doing these tours of Cleveland Clinic painters and stuff, and we've all known like artists that you're like, why don't anybody know about this person? Their work is so amazing, and it's all like a crapshoot of capitalism and weirdness, and like we can't really do anything about it. But what we try, and I think what this shows is like a sense of whimsy, a sense of understanding like what's funny and what's not, and what's macabre about it, and just being able to be in love with the process. And I think what this wall kind of represents is that here are so many individuals who probably took their own money to make these publications, and maybe 50, 100 people know about it or actually held it in their hands, and like to want to do that is like very inspiring to me. I'm cut from a similar cloth of just wanting to be a part of processes and just being curious enough and like keeping enough child pose to want to try and make things, even though my material concerns are, you know, you're not gonna get famous. Like, who cares? Who would want to be famous? The more famous you are, the closer you might end up to like Elon Musk or somebody. I like the shape of this wall. Like, I think this represents what this place is all about. You know, it's like, when you look at it from across the room, like if you were looking, it just looks like a very attractive shape, you know? And you get up close, you can see the individual stories, and that's kind of like what humans are. From afar, we're just like blobs. But when you get up close to us, like, you can see all this detail and nuance, and that's, you know, maybe we should take more time to read each other a little bit closer. Yeah, there's some really cool moments in here. I'm sure, like, when people, you know, Sequoia has a joint up here, and I totally forgot that, like, how I got the, you know.
I remember that day very vividly.
So you never know, like, next time you come, next time you see somebody having like a zine fair or a print fair, maybe you should go and like grab a couple for yourself, or if you would like to get a membership here at Zygote, you know, and hook up with some of our teaching artists or interns and go ahead and make your own publication with Lizzo the Rizzo, the Rizzo, you know. Yeah.
Any other questions? Or no? Well, we're gonna stick around and hang around for a while, so you can come up and ask us questions. But I think we can end this portion. Let's give a hand to the noted scholar. Very well presented. Thanks, R.A. You done? Okay, good. So, they
Oh,
want-
you were strict